it's Renette and welcome back to another Mom Chat Mondays. Today's episode is going to be my 6-week postpartum update. I can't believe it's been 6 weeks already. Time is flying and it's going slow at the same time. Sometimes when I look at my daughter Maeve, she looks like she's like 3 months old. So I'm kind of in that limbo where things are going pretty fast, but it also feels like it's going very slowly. As of today, I'm actually officially 7 weeks postpartum. But I just had my 6-week postpartum checkup this past week, so I wanted to wait for that before I gave you my 6-week postpartum update. So I really thought about whether or not I wanted to do this update just because things have been going crazy these last 6 weeks, but I figured if I'm going to be sharing the good with you all, I should also share the bad, especially for the moms or the wannabe moms or the married to moms or whoever who follow me. I think I would be doing them a disservice to just tell you guys all the good and withhold the bad that happens. If you watched Maeve's birth story, Mom Chat Monday, then you know that this delivery went super fast and I didn't have an epidural this time, which for me made the recovery process really different than the last time. I was up and about super quickly and I felt overall really good after the delivery. I didn't feel much pain down there and I didn't have any complications in my back like I did last time because of the epidural. And because I felt so good, I was up and about very quickly. I was sort of back to my routine. Everything seemed to be normal, except for the fact that this time around I had very heavy postpartum bleeding. Before I left the hospital, they always said normal to heavy bleeding is customary depending on who you are. It just becomes concerning when you start filling up a pad an hour. So that was like my gauge for abnormal bleeding. So I was just bleeding heavily, much heavier than I did with Declan postpartum. It was just like full on all the time, but it wasn't a pad an hour. It was like a pad like every 2 hours. So in my mind, I was trying to justify that it's okay. But not just the bleeding, it was also, I was passing really large clots, TMI. I could feel them coming out of my body and it was a very uncomfortable, disgusting feeling to go through. And I kept looking up online, they're like, if it's larger than a boiled egg or larger than a plum, then that's concerning. But like, I wasn't visually seeing them, I could just feel them coming out of my body because by the time I sat on the toilet, they were gone, This is a lot of information, so I hope you're not eating or having snacks. It's TMI, but I think it's important for those of you to reference when you're going through your postpartum for what's normal and what's not normal, because I tried to justify a lot of what happened to me was normal. And I think it was also, now being a mom of 2, I was just preoccupied with trying to get into a new routine and just taking care of them. It got to a point where I couldn't ignore what was happening, and that was about 3.5 weeks postpartum. I was just going through so many pads and started to get to that pad an hour situation. One evening around midnight, we're all getting ready for bed. We go to bed and I wake up like an hour later with intense cramping. And I go sit on the toilet and the bleeding that is happening sounds like, when you turn on a water faucet, not like so little that's just dripping, but just a little bit more and it's just like a steady stream. That's what it sounded like. I was bleeding a steady stream. And I was like, this does not sound or look good. It looked like Bloody Sunday. I wake up my husband. I'm like, I think I need to go to the hospital. But I'm trying to like get to a point where I'm not bleeding so much so I could stand up and put on clothes and like get ready to go to the hospital. And stupid me, I was like, I'm just going to drive myself because first of all, this is America. An ambulance bill will send you to the poorhouse. So I was like, I'm not going to call an ambulance. I can just drive myself. So I get up from the toilet and I'm like, let me just change Maeve and get her stuff set up in case I'm in the ER for a long time because, ER wait times can be very long. So I get up, I put on a brand new pad, hoping that would like last me until I get to the hospital. Literally the 5 minutes I get Maeve to change her diaper, I'm bleeding out. And my husband comes to the bathroom and he just sees like this blood dripping all over the floor. And he is like, what the hell is going on? I'm like, take her, let me go get changed. I go in my closet and as I'm looking for clothes to put on, I just feel like the floor is quickly approaching, like I'm gonna faint. And my husband's like, you're not driving yourself to the hospital. I'm calling 911. And I'm like, no. He's a Canadian, so he's used to everything in healthcare being free, but I'm just like, don't call an ambulance. And he's like, you look like you're about to pass out. So he calls an ambulance, and maybe 5-6 minutes later, 7 guys show up at our house. Ambulance is here, the freaking gurney is here. It's crazy, and it was a little scary. I'm laughing, but at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I just felt so worried for myself and mainly for my children. I could just see Maeve on the bed and she was just crying. It was just a lot that happened. They wheel me out the door and I'm like, my neighbors are probably gonna think like, what the hell is happening in that house? So they drive me to the hospital. To make a long story short, I had lost so much blood. I was at a 6 hemoglobin level, and the doctor said if I had gone any lower, then my organs would start, rationing the leftover blood in my system. And one by one, they would start shutting down. And I'm like, that sounds horrible. I think I laughed at that time too, because everything just sounded so preposterous. Like, how did I get to this point? I had to have a blood transfusion. It was so scary when they were reading me the release, because I'd never had a blood transfusion in my life, and I didn't know like what to think about having somebody else's blood in my system. Mind you, it was to save my life, and at this point I was like so weak because I had so much blood loss. And I was just like, yeah, like, I'll sign the waiver. And mind you, I was there at the hospital by myself because my husband was here with the kids, because we live in California by ourselves. His parents live in Canada. My parents live in Maryland. So there was no one we could call to be like, oh, can you come watch the kids while we go to the hospital? Like, my husband had to be here with our kids, and I was in the hospital by myself. But I preferred that. I felt better knowing that they were safe at home rather than in the hospital or waiting in the emergency room, waiting room, touching all kinds of nastiness. Like, I just would rather them be at home. And I did end up calling my husband and asking him, like, what do you think I should do with the blood transfusion? He was like, just say yes to everything that will get you back to normal. So I ended up doing the blood transfusion, got my blood levels, my hemoglobin levels back to a 10 from a 6. And it should be, I think he said it should have been around a 12 and a 13, but 10 was acceptable. So they came to prescribe me medication. I think it's called norethindrone, to stop the bleeding so I wouldn't go back to the 6 hemoglobin levels that I was at. I was there for about 14 hours and I had 3 units of blood administered to me, and then I felt good enough and I was like, I want to go home. And in those 14 hours, they did an external ultrasound, an internal ultrasound, many rounds of blood work just to see what was wrong with me, and they couldn't figure out where the bleeding was coming from. At first, they thought there was leftover placenta inside my uterus, but that didn't end up being the case. They just said my uterus looked very inflamed and there was a lot of blood clots inside that had to like eventually come out. And the OBGYN on call came to see me and was like, if this medication that we're about to give you doesn't stop the bleeding, I'm going to take you back to surgery and kind of like vacuum your uterus. And I was like, I can't do surgery right now. First of all, surgery is so scary to me. Getting put under is so scary to me, because you get put under and just anything can happen while you're there lying on the bed. Like, surgery should be like the very, very last option. So luckily the medication they gave me did end up stopping the bleeding, and I was supposed to take it for 10 days straight, which I did. In those 10 days, the bleeding got so much better. It never stopped completely, but I wasn't like bleeding a river, So I was able to get back to my day-to-day life. I was able to come back to my children, hang out with them, play with them. Literally on the 11th day, the first day of not taking the medication, round 2, the floodgates open. And this time I'm like, okay, I'm not waiting until I get down to like low blood levels. I'm going to go to the hospital now. Luckily, Brody's mom flew in the day after the first incident happened to help out and to watch the kids. So she was still in town when this second wave happened. So Brody was able to come to the hospital with me. The blood levels weren't as low as they were last time, so there was no need for another blood transfusion, thank the Lord. But they did give me another round of medication. And the ER doctor still wasn't sure what was causing this excessive amount of bleeding. It's like either it's your fibroid that is irritating your uterus or something like that, because I do have a fibroid, or it is your period starting again and it is compounding with your postpartum bleeding and causing this like mega period. And I'm like, all this for a period? Literally, like, ain't nobody got time for a period right now. With Declan, I had a 6-month break because I was exclusively breastfeeding. So I didn't get a period for 6 months, and that was what I was hoping would happen again this time, but I guess that's not the case. So I was like, you know what? If it truly is my period, let me just go through it no matter how intense it is while I have help here, while I have Brody's parents here to help me with the kids, and I can just like lay up on the bed and live in the bathroom. So let me just go through it now rather than just postpone it another week. So that's what I ended up doing. And luckily, as I sit here today and talk to you, I am still bleeding, but it is much less than it was. I'm not hemorrhaging anymore. I just overall feel much better. So I am happy that I just went through the process. Thank you. Hi, Maisie. Want to say hi? Little Maisie is here. Say hi. I know, it's very bright. Sorry, Bubba. She needs to eat, so I'm going to feed her while I tell you this next part of the story. Hashtag mom life. As I mentioned, I had my 6-week postpartum doctor's appointment this past week. So when I got to the office, there was a whole setup for a full pelvic exam. And I was shocked in a good way. Because if you watch my birth story with my son Declan, I'll link it here. At my 6 weeks postpartum appointment, my doctor was first an hour and 45 minutes late. And when he arrived, my appointment was 5 minutes. He asked me if I was in pain, how I was feeling, and I literally told him I'm still in pain. I was in pain after my birth, after my delivery with Declan for 12 weeks straight. Like it hurt to sit down, it hurt to pee. There was like a lot of issues. And he just asked me if I was in pain. And I said yes. And he's like, oh, it'll get better. And I was like, okay. Like he didn't offer me any medication, any like solutions, anything. Mind you, I had an episiotomy with Declan and 3rd-degree tears. And he didn't check not one thing. He came in, saw me, asked me a question, and left after being an hour and 45 minutes late. This appointment was on time. I walk in, full pelvic exam, because you would think after giving birth and after having stitches, because with this one, I had 1 2nd-degree tear, which I needed like small stitches for. You would think they would want to check up on the stitches you would think, but not with that doctor. So like the more I go through this pregnancy, the more I realize I was really like let down my first pregnancy, but you know, we move forward, we move on. I just felt so much better after this 6-week postpartum appointment, and she did clear me to start exercising, like light exercising, mind you, stretches, walking, and slowly start building into like my full workouts that I used to do. So that's what I've been doing. I started this week and I took the kids out for our first walk with the double stroller, and Lonnie came along too. We went to the park. I walked about a mile. Then I came back and I started doing my breathing exercises to help re-strengthen my pelvic floor, just warm up activities to get me back to the rhythm I used to have, just slowly but surely. I stepped on the scale this morning for the first time in a little while, and I am about 2 pounds away from my pre-pregnancy weight. So when I went into labor, I was 263 pounds. I am now at 224 pounds. So about 4 pounds away from my pre-pregnancy weight, but I am still about 24 pounds away from my pre-Declan weight. So in the last 6 weeks, I have lost about 43 pounds, which is great. My goal is to get back to my pre-pandemic weight. That was a bad year for all of us, I'd say, because I think I gained like about 10 pounds. It was a lot of muscle because I was working out a lot. I was intense working out and my body looked fit, but I was just at the heaviest I'd ever been before all this. Because generally I'm about 175 to 180. So I want to get back to that point. So I still have a lot of work to do, but I feel great. I feel great about my body. It's gone through a lot. It's gotten me through a lot. So I'm not going to rush it. I'm not going to push myself too much. So I'm going to give you guys a belly bump date. My stomach isn't flat by any means, and there's a lot of loose skin, but I feel like the more I work, the more I eat clean and eat right, it'll get to what it needs to be when it needs to be there. And I think having gestational diabetes this pregnancy was really a blessing in disguise because it did teach me a lot of great eating habits. I no longer drink soda. When I want like a carbonated beverage, I drink sparkling water with a splash of lemonade or a splash of whatever juice we have in the house. And when I say a splash, I mean like a tablespoon splash with the sparkling water. And I'm hoping to get a soda stream for my birthday. Fingers crossed, so I can make my own sodas, my own sparkling water at home. My breakfasts are more nutritious, more filling, really protein fat heavy, whereas before it was very carb heavy. Like I would have a bagel or some sort of bread item, which isn't as filling and spikes up your blood sugar. I've never been a lunch person, to be honest with you. I've never ever been a lunch person unless I was in school and they made lunch for us, because it just seems like what do you eat? Is it dinner food? Like lunch food is just so blah to me. Like I love breakfast and I like dinner, but lunch is just like blah. So I eat breakfast and I eat dinner. Usually around lunchtime, I'll have a protein shake or something like that, or a salad, and I'll do a what I eat in a day video for you guys coming up here. I'm not being too intense with my diet because I am breastfeeding and I want to make sure I have enough nutrients and enough calories to give myself enough milk to feed my baby. Which leads me to the last part of my update, which is my breastfeeding journey. So with Maeve this time around, I decided I'm not going to pump, at least right away. What I use is my haka that I use on the side that she's not feeding from, just to collect the letdown. And that collection of letdown is what I store, and just to start a little stash, but I'm not like actively pumping. And that little stash really got me through the time I was in the hospital. So I will say, even if you're not pumping, you definitely just have that haka handy to collect your letdown. Just to have extra on hand, because you just never know. But other than that, our breastfeeding journey is going great. She latched automatically. My milk came in really quickly, probably because there was only a 6-month break from when I stopped breastfeeding Declan when he turned 2 to when she was born. So my body was just like, this again. It just like kicked into high gear. There was no colostrum really. It just was straight milk from the beginning. And she was 8 pounds, 13 ounces when she was born. And then at her 2-week appointment, she was 11 pounds. So she's done great with weight gain. And I think by now 6 weeks, she feels like she's about 13 pounds, but we'll see. She goes in for her 2-month appointment soon. So we're doing great now. In your postpartum period, while you're taking care of this newborn, if you have other children, while you're taking care of them, while you're trying to recover, just make sure to pay attention to what's going on in your own body, because you can't pour into others from an empty cup. So just be kind to yourself and pay attention to what's happening to you, and don't dismiss things if you don't feel right about it. Like my intuition was telling me that something was wrong, and I kept dismissing it, hoping it would get better, until I almost passed out on my closet floor and there were 7 men standing up around me. And now I have an ambulance bill coming in the mail. So just don't postpone taking care of yourself, because you'll never regret it. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Mom Chat Mondays. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And if you don't already, follow me on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll see you on another Mom Chat Mondays. Bye.